Welcome to the Better Relationships, Better Work webcast, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of 2 books, a keynote speaker, and leadership trainer on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. In today's episode, we talk about the importance of commitment and devotion over time to forming meaningful relationships. And we explore why it's so important to embrace people for who they are and not expect them to be anything else. These are but a few of the things that I discuss with today's guest, Rebecca Ryan. Rebecca is an economist and a futurist. In fact, she's one of only 400 people in the world to hold the APF designation from the Association of Professional Futurists. She has written 3 books, and she is a brilliant speaker. I first saw Rebecca speak about 20 years ago and was immediately captivated by her brilliance and her energy. Today, I am grateful to call her a friend and a mentor. Please check out Rebecca's recent project, 10 by 10, 10 trends for the next 10 years. It is terrific. There's a link to it in the description below. This was such a fun conversation and so full of wisdom. Please enjoy Rebecca Ryan. Rebecca Ryan, thank you for being here and joining me for this conversation.
It's an honor, honestly. I'd do whatever you asked me to do. I'd walk on hot coals.
Well, hopefully this is less painful than hot coals, but you can let me know at the end. As I warned you, I'm going to throw a few questions at you here to just get to know you a little bit and kind of what your maybe relational style is or relationship style so that we can have that context as we talk more about relationships in a minute and your personal specific relationships. So let me start with this, just because I think it's a fun question. Where do you self-identify on the introvert to extrovert scale?
I actually had to look this up because I felt like my knowledge of introvert and extrovert was probably dated to circa 1989. And I'm an ambivert. I get a lot of energy from my own personal reflection time, and I get a lot of energy from being around other people in most situations. So I'm both.
That seems to be a more common answer these days. It used to be this question used to be an easy one to ask people, and they would immediately identify to one end of the spectrum or the other. But it seems to be this is one place in our lives where we are less polarized than we were in the past. So I guess that's progress. We'll take that. But I'm curious, when you think about that, what does that look like in terms of how it impacts how you show up in personal relationships or individual relationships with people, do you think?
Well, because I have a reflective inner life, I think when I'm interacting with people, I interact best with people who also have a reflective inner life. And a couple years ago, I did this exercise where I basically determined who my first ring of people were. And all of those people are people who I can feel vulnerable with, people I know very well, who know me very well, and people who are sort of like in it for the journey, right? Who are like, yeah, like let's go. And so I think I'm clear about who I prefer to spend my time with, and that's been a great gift.
And that's a great lesson too, I think, for all of us to invest a little time, a little bit of thoughtful time thinking about relationships actually improves the quality of your relationships overall. I think that's our first lesson for the day is what I'm hearing.
Well, this came out of a really interesting story that I heard Gretchen Rubin. She's kind of the happiness expert. She shared this little it's a true story. This was like a high-level consultant at like a McKinsey or a Bain or one of these big consulting firms. And he found out he had, let's say, 6 months to live. And so he started to like meet with all of his clients and all of his team members and to like have his last time with them. And he ran out of time for spending time with like his kids and his wife. And he was like, oh my God, I spent all this time, and he called it the third ring, and I should have been spending my time in the first ring. And it was from that sort of story that I was like, who are the people in my first ring? Because I too, as a consultant, this really resonated with me. I spent a lot of time with people who I know well for a finite amount of time and with a kind of a finite scope. A few of them end up being members of my first ring, but very few. And I often starve my first ring because of my work demands. And that is the inverse of how I want to spend my time.
Hmm. I think that is, like I said, great first lesson. So we're off to the races. So let me ask you another question, and this is related, I think, but what would you say is the quality that you most value in a friend?
A good sense of humor. That's it. I mean, and I would say, like, for me, a good sense of humor also comes from like some self-awareness, able to, point your finger at yourself. It comes from sort of being connected in the world, like knowing like things that are happening. But no, a good sense of humor is like period paragraph. Like that is key for me.
Awesome. Good to know. Good to know. And my last question on the get to know you side of here is in 5 words or less, what is the fastest way to lose Rebecca Ryan as a friend?
One of my 5 words is hyphenated, so I took some liberties. If you want to lose me as a friend, here are my 5 words. Try to guilt trip me.
Well done. Well done. That's sticker worthy, gold star sticker worthy. So thank you for that. All right, so I off to a great start today. Well, I gave you some homework. I asked you to think about 2 relationships in your life that are positive and healthy, and we're going to start with a relationship from your personal life, one that you think of as strong and positive and healthy. And so, who are we going to talk about?
We're going to talk about Jan. And for everyone watching or listening, doing this homework was so enriching. And Jason, if you don't have these questions that you've given to your guests posted somewhere, please do that so that people can do this reflection for themselves. Because for both of the people we're going to talk about today, after I did this reflection, I had, like, in one case, tears like dripping out of my eyes. And I sent them the ideas that I had drafted for our talk because I thought, oh, this person really needs to know this. So thank you. And everybody should do this prep. Okay. We're going to talk about Jan.
Well, tell me a little bit about Jan. Thank you for
Okay.
that.
Yeah, of course. So Jan, I think, is maybe 20-ish years older than me. And we met when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and she was in like the peak of her career. So, Julia Louis-Dreyfus has this new podcast called Wiser Than Me. And if I were doing that podcast, Jan is a person I would want to be on this podcast because she was wiser than me at the time, but still is. But what's interesting is, like, over 25 years, you thread in and out of different life stages, different loss stages, different victory stages. And so now I'm in the peak of my career and Jan's retired. And so our conversations have changed over time. But, I wrote a few things down. So forgive me, viewers, for like looking down at my notes. But my first impressions of Jan when I met her 25 years ago were that, like, I could not understand a damn thing that she was saying. I now call this Janglish. Like, she speaks her own version of English, but I could also tell, like, the way she looked at and saw the world was like provocative and interesting to me. So it took me a while to learn Janglish. But then now we have this shorthand with each other. We call it water bugging, because on the surface, a water bug looks like it's darting from thing to thing to thing. But if you understand, like, Jan's Umwelt, like her worldview, once you understand the Jan map, you see how this all connects, and it's so rich and so beautiful. So, a couple of anecdotes that come to mind. So Jan is the kind of friend who, like, I remember one day I had taken myself for a walk because I was in such a piss poor mood. I just had to have a word with myself. So I took myself for a walk, and Jan calls and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going for a walk. Would you want to join me?" Sure. So she drove to sort of where I was, and we started to walk, and we ended up at this place called Monty's Blue Plate Diner in Madison, and we had a piece of pie. I had a piece of lemon meringue pie. They're famous for their pies. And afterwards, she goes, "Do you want to go for a drive?" So we did. And so within a few hours, we went from going for a walk to buying a boat. We bought a boat together that afternoon. And it's like, Jan was like, "I always wanted to buy a boat." I was like, "I was raised on the water." And we found a boat for sale that we could afford. And we like told the guy, like, "We're going to buy this boat." We both had to go back and like check with our respective spouses. And then we reconnected that night. And she had, by the way, gotten a third partner in. So it brought every couple's nut down a few $1,000s. And so Jan is just that kind of a friend. Last year, I called her at one point and I said, "Hey, I have to go take care of a cat. Do you want to ride along?" And she's like, "Yep, what time are you going to pick me up?" So she's just that kind of a friend. So, she's the person whose arms I've cried in the most. And she's the person who, anytime we meet, whenever we leave, it's too soon.
Mm. So she sounds amazing. I love, we're already here, Janglish and water bugs. So like, this is already the gift that keeps on giving. There's lots to take away. As you think about, or as you were reflecting on your relationship with Jan, did you land on anything, any sort of specific nuggets about that relationship that you could identify that is what makes it work between the two of you, or sort of what made it work for you from the beginning or since? Like, I'm just curious what kind of insights bubbled up for you.
Well, so we've got 25 years now together, right? And so there are a couple of things that I think make it work. One is that we are both really devoted to each other, and we know that. So, like, like I winter in North Carolina, and she and her husband go to cruises in warm places during the winter. So we never see each other during the winter. And now that she's retired, she has more time. I don't have quite as much time. So we're not spending as much together time as we used to, but we are so devoted and we stay connected, and it's a priority. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is this thing I kind of alluded to already. She is just damn good company. She can talk about anything. She, she, there are people who can just match the tone. So like if the tone is serious, she's serious. If the tone is light, or if it needs lightening, she lightens it up. So she's just, she's an incredible person. I think we're just a good match in some ways.
Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing the list is long on lessons probably that you have learned or taken from this relationship, but is there one that stands out for you? Something that you've learned, or some insight that you've gained about relationships from your relationship with Jan that's helped you with others, or helped you in other relationships?
Yeah, so Jan is one of those people who, and maybe people like this. I'm not one of these people. I'm the opposite. But Jan is one of those people who just kind of has a clear compass. She just really has a lot of clarity. And I was raised in a very violent and chaotic home, and I did not emerge from my childhood with clarity or a clear compass. Mine was really whacked by my childhood. And so like I spent my 20s and 30s basically like in the self-help section of the bookstore trying to figure out like how to be an adult. So for people like me who just don't have this clarity, like I benefit from having people in my life who can help me sort of tack. So in sailing, my wife is a very good sailor, and I have learned that like, when you're sailing, because the winds change and the water changes, you don't just go in a straight line, you have to tack. So you sort of go this way for a while, and then the wind changes, then you go that way for a while. And so the people in my life who I have valued, like Jan, they're really good at helping me sort of tack, because I just didn't emerge with this like clear compass. I've developed it over time. So Jan is a person who has that clear compass, but also like the way that she will ask questions. She never tells you what to do, right? She just is interested in you as a person, and she asks these incisive questions so that it becomes clear to you sort of what the taglines are. So she's just been this really steady person. And I think like if you did this interview with someone else and they might name me as their person, I can't imagine that happening, but maybe it could, right? I would hope that they would say that I have been that steady, reliable, curious, and accepting friend for them.
So do you have any examples that come to mind on that you can share or would share about a moment where she sort of helped you with that to kind of, because I'm always curious, you hear this, but I think it would be helpful for someone that maybe is hearing this and saying, what does that look like or what does that feel like? So would love to hear an example if you have one.
Yeah. So Jan used to have this purple couch at her prior home. It was this purple suede couch. And this was like during my 20s and 30s when I was really like working out a lot of relationships and dilemmas. And I had my business at this time. And so I remember there was one time where I was taking my whole team to Palm Springs, California. And there was a person on my team who I uninvited from going to the team meeting because I was firing her because her performance she was just crazy making in our organization. And she added value, but it didn't supersede the crazy making that she was creating. And I was so nervous about uninviting her. And I think I gave the person like mixed signals about whether to come to Palm Springs or not. And then I was like, oh my God, what if she just shows up in Palm Springs? So I went to Jan and I had a purple couch session, where she kind of walked me through. And she said to me, because I felt so bad about the mixed signals. And Jan said, honey, you blinked. You're allowed to blink. And it was just one of those deeply insightful, very human moments where she was like, we all blink, And so that's one of those things that I've just carried with me is you're allowed to blink. So you zig when you should have zagged, make it right as quickly as you can. And life isn't always easy or fair, and there are trade-offs. So those purple couch moments have been phenomenal.
Well, I'm glad you shared that because what I thought you were going to say reminds me of I had a kind of a mentor in my life for a while years ago that reminds me a little bit of Jan in the way that like he communicated kind of like Yoda, right? You just like there was never a straight line kind of thing. And instead of like often he would not give me the you blinked, it's okay. He would say, like, I'll never forget one day he said to me, I was going on and on telling him about a business problem or something I was struggling with. And he just said to me, he goes, sometimes we make it really hard for people to do business with us. And then and it was sort of similar, right? Like that, but it was like, and then he would usually follow it up with some kind of question that didn't solve anything, but it left me sitting in the right question to wrestle with that then led me to the thing that was the thing I probably needed to find or get clarity on. So I love that example. And it's so important to have people like that in our lives. So thank you for sharing that. Jan
What's
sounds
that
amazing.
dude's name?
His name was Roger, and sadly, he's not with us anymore. He was another person much older than I was, so much wisdom, and for whatever reason, took an interest in me, and super beneficial. So grateful. His fingerprints are all over my thinking. So this webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. Which brings us to he was a mentor in the work world for me. And so let's transition to the second relationship I asked you to think about, which was a work relationship or a relationship that came to you through work, and something that, someone or a relationship that's had either a positive impact on you or your career. So who are we going to talk about here?
We're going to talk about Lisa. And for everybody who's worked with me in the last 10 years, you know Lisa.
we all know Lisa. So tell us about Lisa. Tell us about this relationship.
Yeah. So Lisa and I have worked together for 10 years, but we've known each other longer than that because she was the EA for the former Madison Chamber of Commerce executive when I was on their board. So I would see Lisa at every board meeting, and I just loved her energy. There's sort of a no nonsense, get shit done sensibility about her. She's always very focused and directed, but she is also a ton of fun. And nobody spends a few minutes with Lisa without like throwing their head back with laughter. She's like the Charles Barkley of one-liners, and she has a way of making everybody feel special. And so what had happened was Lisa's former boss, I think left the organization at the same time that Lisa was on maternity leave. And during that time, two big things happened in my life. One is that my wife said that she wanted to divorce, and she was also my business partner at work. And my brother died unexpectedly. Those things happened within 6 weeks of each other. And I was shattered, and I was really freaking out about like how I was going to keep my work together because I was just broken. And I remember talking with Lisa's and my mutual friend, the former chamber executive, who was just a real buoy during that time. And she was like, who could you reach out to sort of help you on the work side? And it was like, we both looked at each other and was like, ding, Lisa. So I called Lisa. I had come home from a work thing, and I was sitting in my car in the garage. And I remember the light went out in the garage because I was sitting so long in the car. And I called Lisa, and she picked up right away. And how's the new baby? And I said, Lisa, these are the things that have happened. Would you just come and work with me for 90 days, just 3 months, so that I can kind of figure out what shape this thing is going to take? And luckily, I mean, she was kind of aching to like be doing something. And she said yes. And that was 10 years ago.
That is a great and lucky phone call, it sounds like. So, I asked you, or I gave you a little homework to think about like the impact that she's had on you over that time. I'm sure it's enormous, and we don't have time for all of it, but what are a couple things you can highlight about your relationship with Lisa that has the biggest positive impact for you?
Well, we are a yin yang, right? So Lisa is very organized. She's a list maker, and I'm very conceptual and big picture. So together, like, that's a formidable thing. The other yin to the yang is I can take things very personally and sort of internalize them and sort of feel bad about things. And Lisa is Sicilian. And so if she feels like somebody doesn't want to have something to do with you or something ends badly, she's like, move on, and she usually throws an expletive or some hilarious turn of phrase on the top of it to just kind of snap you into like, let's keep moving forward here. This is ridiculous. But the thing that we have in common is we are both very competitive. So we both played sports. And so the thing that I think about, so I played professional basketball, and like I think about, you can go into a kind of a desperate situation towards the end of a game. Maybe you're down 2 points, there's 0.7 of a second on the clock. And if you have the right people on the court with you, you have a really good chance of winning, even though you're down. And Lisa's that person. Like if she is on the court with me and we are facing something hard, I know it's going to be great because we're going to between the two of us, we are going to put it on our backs and huff it out.
Mm, that's awesome. It's amazing having people like that around you. Um, and I suspect, I mean, I think everybody craves having more people like that, right? That's what, when we talk about teams and all those things, those are the people that we want. So I'm curious what you feel like you've learned through your relationship with Lisa over the last decade or so that you've been able to use or apply to other relationships to help other relationships be better. And you've clearly, I mean, you've been in business a long time and worked with a lot of people. So I'm curious what that looks like.
Well, I had two answers ready, but then a third one came to mind. So the first answer was going to be persistence. Like Lisa never gives up. And I watched her stay on the phone with a company I won't name for several hours waiting to talk to the right person to get a refund on a hotel room because she knew we were in the right and that refund was available, but the frontline person was not giving her what she wanted. So she was like, get me with your manager. I'll wait. And like 2 hours she was on. So she is so dogged about stuff that when she knows, she's dogged. The second thing, of course, is resilience. Like we're going to face some stuff, but it's okay. We'll make it through it. But then the third thing is, Lisa and I, our spouses also are like longtime friends. And so one of the things that Lisa says about her spouse, and I'm just trying to be careful here because, I don't want to, I'm not trying to give anything away, but like, I've had my ups and downs in my marriages. I mean, Lisa knew my prior wife. Lisa knows my current wife. And sometimes you bring that stuff to the office. Sometimes you have a bad day or you're going through something. And Lisa says about her husband, whom she adores and he's fantastic. She says, I know who I married. And it's such a good reminder because oftentimes, like in any relationship, you sometimes have the same discussions over and over and over again, or the same arguments over and over again. But like, I know who I married, so like, don't kid yourself that, anybody's going to change their stripes. And that has had a really great impact on my marriage and other relationships as well. Like, I know who I married. And so she's just so down to earth and inspirational and such a good time. You can't help but be positively impacted by her.
She is amazing. I'll give a third party validation on that. Not that she needs it. Everybody knows that interacts. So let's bring this home. I want to bring it back. That my fascination with the exploration of our personal relationships is, to learn so we can have better relationships generally. But, the bigger thing we're chasing here is how can we fix work and make work better for people? And that's all about better relationships. And so let's talk about how we can pull a couple of these lessons that you've shared with us into the work environment. And you've been managing and leading people for a long time. So I'm really curious to get your take on this. So I love if I go back to Jan, one of the things I heard, at least I'm hoping that I heard this correctly, is that, well, there's two lessons. One that I heard is part of the key to having a really healthy relationship is being committed, devoted to one another, being in it and committed. What do you think that looks like, or how can we bring that to the workplace to heal or improve the work relationship, do you think?
I really love this question because my answer isn't going to be obvious if you just heard the story of Jan or you just heard the story of Lisa. But what I draw from that about commitment is that really good relationships take time. And, marriages take time, work relationships take time. It takes time to learn Janglish. It took time to learn how Lisa worked best and what she valued. And, to identify like when she was being pushed to her edge and me. I mean, this is two-way. So I think the one thing is like, I think sometimes we're very quick to judge, like if somebody's not working out or somebody did something in the wrong way in the first 2 weeks, or, they made an error. Like we tend to just judge them and cancel them. And I just think if anybody listening or watching this thinks about the relationships that they have valued over time, did you love that person from the jump? Did you think like, oh, this person's going to be an amazing teammate from the jump? It probably took some time. You had to be in some foxholes together. And so I think the first lesson would just be like, good relationships require that commitment, and devotion. So don't be afraid to put in the time.
That's why, one of the things I say all the time is time is the currency of relationships. And so if you
Mm.
want better relationships, you should invest your time in them. That is part of how commitment and devotion looks. I also love that you said that one of the things you value and you've taken away from your relationship with Jan is she helps you find clarity. What do you think that looks like? How do you do that with people, with your team members? Like what does that look like in your experience?
Well, I say this all the time, but like as leaders, it's not the job of a leader to have the answers. It's the job of a leader to have the questions. And I think it's like just this huge fallacy, and it's a problem with leadership that leaders think they need to be the decision maker, and maybe they do. But a lot of things should take place before the decision is made. Like right before the decision is made, you should be discerning about what the decision should be. And before you discern, you should have asked a lot of questions and listened to a lot of, input or some valuable input. So I think the clarity that Jan helps elicit in me has always come from like caring questions.
Well, as I was listening to your story too, the story about you blinked, some of that's clarity, some of that's also permission. I think
Mm,
sometimes is like she was giving you permission to forgive yourself. Like,
yeah.
kid, it's okay, man. Not everybody, we don't all get it right all the time. It's okay. It's what
Yeah.
happens next. It's what happens next. Everybody blinks. It's the difference is what happens next. So I think that's something we overlook too as leaders is giving people permission. Forgive yourself, take a mulligan, or go take another crack at that, or believe in yourself. I believe in you. You can believe in yourself. That's okay. I think that's a really powerful piece of relationship too that doesn't cost us anything as leaders that we can give away and should give away pretty freely. Last one, and I am so interested to get your take on this one is of the Lisa, I mean there's lots of Lisa lessons there, but the one I love the most is I know who I married, because that deeply resonates for me. Like that's one of the things I value most in my marriage is that on my worst days, Angie's always like, she never ever makes it feel like she's like, yeah, no, it's fine. Like I got you. Even when I'm not showing up my best, there's never any shame. There's never anything. She just accepts me, even when I'm not on my best. She knows who she married. And so I love that. And I'm curious when you think about that dynamic or lesson, what does that look like, do you think, in the work relationship?
One of my and Jan's mutual friends, Matt, says, um, resentment is premeditated expectation. So I will feel resentful towards a teammate or my wife or a family member if I believe they should be behaving in this way and they veer off of that. It's like I've set myself up to be mad about it, right? And so it's like, just don't expect your person to be different than what they are, you know? And if you can just do that and let people be who they are, it's just gonna, you're gonna decrease so much like suffering for yourself, right? What do they say? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And so, yeah, I'm going to step in the shit sometimes. It is going to happen again and again and again. But I can choose to beat myself up about it, or I can say, wow, I got to clean my boot. Let's keep moving forward. And so, this whole idea of just accepting people as they are, giving them allowance, getting on with it. I think that's the key there.
I love that, and I think that's a perfect place, I think, to wrap this up. So as always, incredible conversation, incredible insights, Rebecca. I really, really appreciate you joining and sharing so freely your experience with Jan and Lisa. Some great lessons there. So thank you for being here. I so appreciate you.
Thank you for hosting these conversations, because, man, if we can heal this stuff in ourselves, but also at work, we can all be dancing and singing at work.
Indeed. What a great visual to end on. So, Rebecca, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jason. See ya.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.